Welcome, everybody. Happy to have you all here with us this evening. My name is Greg Leparati. I'm Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Baruch. I hope you have all had a wonderful, safe, and healthy new year and holiday season as we move into 2022. I'm Zooming from Queens. Please put in the chat where you're Zooming from. It's always cool to see where our alumni are Zooming in from. We've had people from Australia, from Asia, from Europe. It's been very cool to see, and also just from all throughout New York City. So let us know in the chat where you're Zooming from. As we head into this new year, it's a wonderful time for us to start thinking about our brand. Many of us are thinking, trying to do new things this year, or how we want to accentuate, the brand we've always had. So this is going to be a really interesting webinar. Very excited and pleased to be joined today by Nicola Scalisi. I'll introduce Nicola now. She's completed her master's in industrial organizational psychology at Baruch in December of 2020. And through her study, she realized the importance of setting smaller, tangible goals and knowing what steps are needed to actually follow through on them. Her approach to coaching is holistic. She believes in getting to know her clients' lifestyle, habits, and passions to fully help them set their goals and plan their careers. She specializes in helping young professionals find the career path that best suits their passions and skills. But something that's great about an event like this is it really bridges the gap. Young professionals are looking to potentially accentuate their brand with a website of their own. We've got people who are more seasoned in their careers who are maybe thinking about a side hustle or something else they want to do and want to accentuate that this upcoming year. And a website could be a great way to help put your brand out there. So I'm really excited for this presentation. I would like to just say a few ground rules. If everybody could mute themselves, and you can turn your videos on if you'd like. We love to see our alumni smiling faces, but definitely mute yourself during the presentation. And please direct all of your questions to the chat. We'll be monitoring it throughout the presentation. We'll try to answer as many as we can, and there will be time at the end of the presentation for us to get to anything we might have missed during the presentation. So with that, I'll now give the floor to Nicola, and thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm definitely excited to do this. So I want to say thank you for attending, definitely. I know you had a little bit of a bio there, so you know a little bit about me, but just to give you a little bit more kind of personal information. So I'm a native New Yorker. So I've lived here my whole life. I currently work as a talent developer at a telecommunications company. So I do that kind of full time. And then on the side, I have a coaching business, which is called Thrive Guidance. So my main work in that is really working with clients, helping them set career goals. Many of my clients are people who maybe are in one field and are looking to switch or do something a little bit different. So that's kind of what I do on top of my other job. Schooling wise, I know you know that I graduated from Baruch in 2020, but I was CUNY through and through. So I went to Hunter College and undergrad. At the time, I didn't really know what I was looking to do, and I studied Italian language, which was equally fun, but kind of went a different direction in grad school. In my free time, I really love cooking and baking and dancing. So I'm probably either like taking a salsa dancing class or trying a new recipe if I'm not actually working. So I know you know the topic of what we're talking about today. So you know this is personal brand. We're talking about website building. Now, what I really want to start with is what is your brand? And the reason I want to start with this here is because this is really going to be like the inspiration for building a personal website. So a personal brand, it could be what makes you unique, makes you stand out from other individuals. Typically, a personal brand is something that's going to focus on your strengths. You're going to talk about maybe your past experiences, maybe the things that you want to achieve. It should give a sense of who you are both professionally and personally. So I want you to take a moment here to think about people who have a really successful personal brand. So is it clear to you who they are and what they stand for? So whether you like them or not, There are famous people who I can guarantee you have a super clear vision of who they are and what their qualities are. So think of somebody like Martha Stewart or Beyonce. These are people who they have worked very hard and for a very long time at kind of creating this clear image of who they want people to think of when they hear their name. So some things that are kind of the base of creating this personal brand for yourself are these questions here that I have listed. So I'm going to read through them and then I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about each. So what are your strengths? I mentioned that before. What do you value most? Now, what I mean here is not, you have this like one prized possession or this thing in your home that is very important to you, even though that is lovely. What I mean here is more of like in a work sense. What are the values that are really important to you? So for me, of something I really value in a work environment would be transparency. Or having a leadership team that allows people to be creative and really like voice their opinions. So that would be something that I value very greatly. What are you passionate about? So what are the things that really interest you that like make you feel more alive and happy to talk about every day? And then what makes you unique? So you might have a hard time doing this at first, because I feel like sometimes people will look at these questions and say, I don't know how to answer this. So one thing I suggest is writing it down. I think if you really struggle with this and you feel like you yourself cannot answer these alone, it's really helpful to ask another person these questions, who knows you hopefully relatively well, and maybe they can help you kind of talk it through. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is uniqueness, because I think sometimes when I ask people what makes them unique, people are honestly sometimes really hard on themselves. Like they're like, oh, I'm not that unique. There are a zillion people with the same degree or the same area that I studied who are looking for this job or looking to go into this field. Like, I don't know what would make me special. And uniqueness here, it really doesn't need to be like you created this thing and you have a patent for this thing you created, or you're creating the new iPhone. It doesn't need to be anything like that. Maybe it is like a love of ice hockey that you have and you do that in your free time. Maybe it is enjoying on your days off, going to museums and painting. Maybe it's being skilled in a certain technology. All of those things are things that could potentially make you unique. It doesn't have to be like that you have 13 patents. So just try to think of it a little bit more like that. So after thinking of those questions, I think the other question that often comes up is like, how does this actually help me? So some ways, if you can actually articulate these things and be able to maybe write them down or just speak to them, it may help employers or clients because they'll have an understanding of who you are and what you value. Maybe they'll have a better idea of what you do now or what you want to do, meaning like maybe you're not there yet. People are going to have a clear description of your uniqueness, what makes you stand out against others. It could also help with referrals. So if others have a clear idea of what you do, they can more easily refer you. So a great example I have here is one of my clients is an email marketer. So I won't name any names here, obviously, just general email marketer. And she has a very technical role. Like, so what she does is CRM basically. And again, it's very technical, very niche in my opinion. She's great at being able to give people kind of specific examples and what she does. So when she was looking for a role about a year ago, and she was speaking with many different recruiters, sometimes they wouldn't be as familiar with like the type of marketing that she did, but she was so excellent at being able to kind of describe what she did that oftentimes, even if recruiters didn't currently have a role that fit her, she had many people kind of return back to her a couple months later and say, hey, I found this role recently, or I'm trying to fill this open spot. I remember you talking to me about, you being an expert in this. I think you'd be a good fit. And so she eventually found a new role actually kind of like that. You can utilize this in many ways. So again, maybe it's on your resume, your website, which we're going to talk to later. Could be your LinkedIn. Maybe it's on social media, meaning like a professional social media, not just like a personal Instagram, something like that. Portfolio, if that's pertinent to the field that you're in, and then also potentially business cards. So another component of your personal brand is going to be your elevator pitch. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't love the term elevator pitch. I feel like it's really overused. And I think oftentimes it can sound very like salesy in not a good way. So maybe this is like more of a personal pitch, if you want to call it. But I use this term here because I feel like people have like a general idea of what an elevator pitch is. So hopefully it's paints a little bit clearer of a picture for you. But the idea of this is having like 2 to 4 sentences roughly of a synopsis of who you are, what you are about, and also what you want to achieve. And so those are really the 3 main parts that I think are the most important thing in an elevator pitch. Again, it's going to be like who you are, what your core values are, kind of what your North Star is basically, and then where you're trying to go, what you're looking to achieve. Those are those components that I think it needs to have. So I wanted to highlight here for an elevator pitch, again, those few lines synopsis of who you are. It should definitely include, what you do, what you want to do. It should definitely include what you value. Maybe you would have it include some of your passions, again, those things that you really love. So for example, like in my bio statement that I started, that you all heard in the beginning of this, things that I'm very passionate about are being able to make organizations more inclusive and help people in the organization feel like they're more prepared to do their jobs every day in different kind of teaching or coaching that I do. So maybe that would be the passion I would speak to. Any qualities that make you stand out. So again, I've talked to that before. I won't repeat that stuff, but again, any quality or skill that maybe makes you stand out from others. And I think a good elevator pitch can include a fun fact or a hobby. Maybe it's like a unique experience or an interest of yours. I think all of those are nice to speak to. So the only thing I will say here for the last bullet is just make sure it isn't too much personal information. You also want to make sure, again, that the statement doesn't run too long. So these are some things that I would say it should not include. So it shouldn't include too much personal information that isn't pertinent to career goals or your career in general. So an example here, like you all know a little bit about me now, that I have my coaching business in which I help people kind of work on their careers. It might not be pertinent for me to include that I have a sister who is 8 years older than I in an elevator pitch. It's not something that I need to state. You definitely don't want to put too much information, meaning like once it's 5 sentences or more, I would say it's really too long. Inconsistencies or exaggerations. So, I think of here the phrase, which I'm sure people have heard of, like fake it till you make it. We don't want any faking here, so we want you to be honest. So any sort of skills or things that you enjoy or that you're talented at, definitely highlight them. But we definitely don't want you to state that you're like an expert in Excel and you really just have kind of basic working knowledge. So again, you just want to make sure that we're being honest here. Lastly, the jargon, idiomatic expressions, or verbiage that only certain groups will understand. Really what I mean here is you want to make sure that the statement is simple. So using specific verbiage that maybe some people who are looking at your statement or maybe hearing you say it won't understand. will kind of limit you. So like, let's say you're in a role that's very technical. Maybe you, and this is not a field I know kind of in depth about, that I'd be able to rattle off certain things, but let's say coding. So you know a lot of different coding languages. You can definitely list all of the languages that you know, but you might want to give a little synopsis of what that is in the beginning, just so someone isn't completely lost. Same thing with kind of jargon or idiomatic expressions is really just not necessary in that kind of statement. So I would just kind of stray away from including things like that. So this is totally a dig at myself, but the example I wanted to give here is like stating that you love going to work out at Orange Theory and you love the chocolate covered almonds at Trader Joe's, like probably isn't necessary for your brand statement. So your brand statement it should be between 1 and 3 sentences. Again, I'm okay with a little flexibility here. The main takeaway is that it needs to be concise. So if it goes to 4 sentences, I think that's okay. But again, you just want to make sure it's not too long. It should be really easy to read and understand. It should also be reevaluated regularly. And so I'm going to pause here because I think this is a really important one. Just because you make a brand statement now, or you kind of create whatever you want your brand to be now, doesn't mean you have to stick with it forever. So if you change kind of what your goals are, if maybe you start attending a new school program and you want it to be geared more towards that, that is okay. You don't need to stick with this kind of same brand statement forever. So that's why I say it should be reevaluated. The example here I kind of think of with that is like with Dwayne Johnson and The Rock. Like Dwayne Johnson was known, I would say, more so as The Rock kind of years ago and earlier on in his career when he was a wrestler. Kind of later on, he's still known as The Rock, but he, started doing a lot of other things aside from wrestling, and he sort of changed his image a bit years forward. The other thing here that I mentioned earlier is it should be completely authentic and genuine. So I don't want you to come up with a brand statement that you feel sounds good or looks good. I want it to be you. It really needs to be representative of who you are, not just an image of what you want to be. And you want it to showcase your strengths and highlight your special qualities. Maybe that's certain knowledge, skills, abilities, whatever that may be. So I talked a lot about what kind of do's and don'ts of an elevator pitch should be, right? I wanted to give you an example here. This is not the example. I'm not saying you have to copy this in any way, but just to give you an example of what one maybe would look like. So Nicola is a native New Yorker that started her career in the tech industry. She strives to make organizations happier, well-balanced, community-focused places that inspire employees with purpose. Her favorite things to do are roam around the West Village on summer evenings and try every noodle dish New York City has to offer. Nicola completed her master's degree in industrial organizational psychology in 2020. So maybe that would be an example of what an elevator pitch would look like. Again, it doesn't always have to be in third person, depending on how and where you're using it, but just so you kind of get an idea of what it might look like. So I know I spent a lot of time talking about brand, elevator pitch, and the reason why I did that really was because that's all the inspiration and kind of the roots of what a personal website is going to be. So even if you don't have a section on your website that actually like clearly states a 3 or 4 line elevator pitch or personal brand statement, I want it to kind of be the essence and the inspiration for how you build your website, because that's really going to be how the website is going to display who you are and your uniqueness to whoever it is that's looking at it. So that's why I kind of started off with that info before I dived into the specifics around a website. So personal website can be a lot of things. I want to make sure that this is clear to you. These are not the only things that a website can be, but I think some of the most common I listed here. So it could be, depending on your field, it could be an online portfolio. It could be a description of what you do. So like a product or a service. So maybe, are you a graphic artist, an email marketer? Are you listing like what your offerings are to potential customers or clients? Website could be a description of who you are and what you're looking to achieve. So maybe you're looking to have a pivot in your career. It could be articulating that. It could just be a simple visualization of your resume and a cover letter. It could be more information about you. Maybe it has testimonials that prove your work. So for example, in my line of work in coaching, maybe I would have some testimonials of clients of mine saying how I've been able to help them achieve their career goals or personal goals, things of that nature. And I think ideally somewhere it should include your brand statement. Again, maybe it's not written the way that I showed it to you before, but some sort of about me so that whoever comes to your website knows a little bit about whose website it is. So I wanted to list some specific tangibles that I think are helpful when you're starting to kind of outline or build a website. So it definitely should include general about me information. Again, doesn't have to go very deep, but I would like some sort of general information about you. A contact you or contact us page. So this could be an email. It could be a blank form in which the person would input like a question and a way to get contacted back. Doesn't have to be a direct link to email you, but some sort of format in which they can reach out to you and you'd reply. I think it should include examples of your best work if pertinent. So where I really think this is a great example is like, let's say you're a photographer and you are trying to use your website to essentially get more clients or show your work, your portfolio. I think having examples of your photography up on the website would be a great idea. I think it should show some sort of demonstration of your work or description of you. So again, depending on your line of work, you may not have a photo or an image to display what work you do. But if you can, show something, do you build websites? Are you able to link to something that you built? Are you able to include an example of a newsletter that you created? Whatever it may be. I would also suggest displaying all of your online presence. So what I mean here is if you feel comfortable linking a LinkedIn page, if you have any sort of professional facing social media accounts, I think all of that could be a great place to kind of put them all in one place. And I think the website also should always include some sort of visuals. So here you can kind of choose what you feel most comfortable with, but visuals could include a logo. It could include your headshot. It could even just include like nice imagery that are perhaps stock images or images even that maybe you've taken. Again, if you're a photographer, someone who has great images that you've created. Maybe you're an artist and you're putting your own art up, something like that. But I do suggest that it has some sort of imagery, not just text. So these are some things that you might want to include. I want to make sure that everyone's clear here. These are not things you have to include. They're just sort of maybe nice to include if you feel that it's pertinent for whatever it is you're looking to do. So one thing that's a nice thing to have is a blog. I think a blog is really nice in two different ways. It can give whoever is looking at your website kind of a deeper dive into who you are and what your thinking is. So for example, like I have a blog on my website in which I talk about kind of different issues or problems that people deal with when they're both either in a workplace, in an organization, or when they're looking for work. And so I like it because one, I like writing, but two, because I feel like it gives you a better idea of who I am and what I stand for. If you don't like writing, don't worry about it. Don't write a blog. But I think it is a great example of a way that you can kind of express yourself and kind of show the world who you are and what your line of thinking is. It's also another way of showing your uniqueness. The only thing I will say with a blog, is if you are going to do that, I suggest that you are committed enough to maintaining it somewhat frequently. Doesn't have to be every week or even every month, but you definitely don't want to have a website that has a blog that has one post from 2017. At that point, you may as well probably not have it, because it's not updated, it's not current. But having some sort of cadence, even if it's every couple of months, is totally fine. You might want to include testimonials. So, maybe if you are someone who has certain work that other people can speak to and say, what a fabulous job or wonderful work you did, testimonials can be a great thing to include on websites too. Maybe you have certain awards or achievements that you've gotten, whether it be through work or through school. Again, a really nice place to highlight those. And then also social media links. But again, I want to say here, only if you have a professional presence on them. If you have a more professional, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever, that's totally fine. But if you only have personal social media accounts, don't worry, don't link any of those. I don't think it's necessary. So now that we've talked about how you can use your website, kind of what you can put on it potentially, where do you really start? Because I think that was definitely the first question I had when I was creating my website. I really had no idea where I had to start. So really the first, square one, is going to be the domain name. So prices vary by desirability of domain name quite a lot. I don't know if any of you have ever looked for one or if you already have one, but typically things that are easier to remember, simple phrases like certain words, maybe even like jokes or puns, typically become more desirable as a domain name. So I typically suggest, kind of first and foremost, to pick and purchase a domain name that is simple and easy to spell. So you have a greater chance for errors, and others will have a hard time finding you if it's really complicated or, has a lot of I don't want to say misspellings, but if it has kind of a more quirky or more creative way in which it is spelled, it might not be as easy to find. Domains can be searched and purchased all over online, and you're going to be able to see the price points for the different domains with all of these. I'm just listing some of the most common here. So GoDaddy, Google, Squarespace, Wix, and WordPress are all places you can purchase domains. Again, these are not all of them, just some of the most common. I would say in my experience, you can typically buy a domain anywhere from $3 to $15 a year. Typically, you're paying a yearly or a 2-year fee for the domains. But just to give an example, let's say you wanted to pick something that was very common. Let's say the word fabulous. I wanted to have fabulous.com as a domain. I'm sure someone has that. But let's say it was available. That type of domain is more likely to be either a couple hundred or even sometimes upwards of $1,000 or $2. So can get very costly. If the domain name is just your name or kind of a version of your name, it's probably going to be a lot cheaper. The other thing here I wanted to call out is ideally, it's not set in stone, but ideally you want it to be a .com website. The reason I say this is because these are really still the most common and easiest to find. So let's say someone is looking for you and you stated to them the website, maybe you're not linking it to them or you're not emailing it to them. It's a lot easier for people to remember, whatever .com as opposed to Nicola.nyc or some other version. If you really love something and you want to do it, go for it. But generally speaking, I suggest picking a .com. So how do you actually create your site? So let's say now, pretend you've gone onto one of these websites, you've picked a domain, you found one for $5 a year, hopefully very affordable, and you now own that domain. How do you actually start creating your website so people can actually come and look at something? It's not just a blank domain. So this is something where I don't have one answer for you, because there are zillions of directions that you could go in potentially. To create a website yourself, there are a lot of different platforms available that are user-friendly. These are the top 3 that I think are both most cost-effective and also user-friendly, so meaning simple. So we have Squarespace, which I feel like they have really wonderful marketing. So I'm sure some of you have at least heard of them before, even if you haven't used it. WordPress is also a competitor to Squarespace, also very, very good and relatively affordable to use as well. And lastly, Wix is another one that is also pretty easy to use. So the idea with all of these different website platform builders is that they essentially work off of templates. So you don't need to know any sort of coding or have any sort of like design knowledge at all. You're able to pick from certain types of templates, and whether that's based on like imagery or colors or text. And then you're able to input your own photos, your own text, your own blog, contact me page, things like that. The average cost for these, again, it varies. They each have their own kind of different plans. Some of them have kind of like a very basic plan that you can then upgrade and spend a lot more. But I would say on average, they typically cost $10 to $15 a month. Some of them have like yearly costs. If you do that, it's a little bit cheaper sometimes. So yearly cost is roughly $50 for some of these. Again, it'll depend on the plan you choose and what exactly you're picking to put on your site. But a very simple personal website is typically going to be around this cost. And honestly, I think some of them you could probably get for even a little bit cheaper than this. So the other thing that I wanted to mention here, which I would not say I typically suggest it, but I wanted to make sure everyone was aware that it's an option, is that you can also pay for someone else to create a website for you. Now, of course, you can find someone who is a freelancer and pay them. Maybe you know someone, if you're lucky, who does that too. Totally an option. But these websites actually have like experts that you can hire. So these people, you might not meet them in person, of course, but these people, you kind of tell them what it is that you're looking to do, what info you're looking to put on the website, and they'll build it for you. So Squarespace and Wix and others have these experts you can hire directly through their platform. The only thing here is that this can be very costly. So I really don't suggest this unless you already maybe have a stream of income coming in from your brand or business. Maybe you feel it's just absolutely necessary because you don't have the time to do it. Just an option. But again, I would say the price to build a website at that point probably quadruples or more from some of the prices I was talking to before. So I wanted you to know that that was there as an option, but again, it's a lot more costly. The other thing I wanted to talk to, just as a tidbit, in case anyone is interested in using any of those platforms I mentioned, like Squarespace or WordPress, if you're looking to kind of learn a little bit with tips and tricks, if you don't feel as comfortable just playing around with it yourself, there are plenty of free tutorials on YouTube for really all of those platforms that I listed. That's honestly how I learned how to build my own website. So, feel free to look on there. The other thing that I think people don't know about as frequently is there is a website called LinkedIn Learning, which is a component of LinkedIn, of course. But it is a website that LinkedIn has in which they have tutorials for honestly so many different platforms. You can learn Excel, you can learn Photoshop, you can learn a lot of different things. But they actually have tutorials on Squarespace, on Wix, on WordPress. Now, typically you have to pay for LinkedIn Learning, and that itself is not free. But in case anyone doesn't know this, in New York City, if you have a New York Public Library card, or if you don't and you're willing to enroll in one, you can enroll online. You don't even have to go in physically. You can actually access LinkedIn Learning's libraries for completely free, no money. So if that interests you and you want to potentially take some classes, I do suggest you either use that library card you have or enroll for a library card. Again, that's free. And then you can check out LinkedIn Learning for some tutorials on how to use these website building platforms. So just something I thought I would mention. The other thing I wanted to talk to with website building is visuals, because this is something that does really matter. And I want to recognize here that not all of us are going to be designers or photographers. Like I am certainly not. So I have no expectation of everyone being a graphic designer. But I do suggest that you use high quality images, fonts that are easy to read, and a text size that is easily legible. So for images, high quality images, I do suggest one, probably not using any sort of clip art. I would kind of try to stray away from that. And then these are some places that I personally use to get free images. So Adobe actually has a stock free collection. So Adobe does have imagery you can pay for, but they have a stock free collection where you can download free images. There's also pexels.com. So I have that listed there also. They're also a free image site. Again, it's mostly stock images, but you can find very like crisp and clean imagery there. The other thing that I think people forget about oftentimes also is PowerPoint. If you have PowerPoint already on a computer of yours, within PowerPoint, at least the newest version, there are stock images available to download. It's pretty simple to search. If you wanted an image of a tree, you type in tree, it gives you the different options. Some of the website building platforms that I mentioned before also have stock images available to download. So for example, I use WordPress, and WordPress offers a stock image like library that you can choose from if you wish to do so. So those are just some options of where to actually download some clean, crisp imagery that you're not using like a poor quality image from somewhere random online. The other thing you want to be aware of is making sure that your website is both mobile and desktop accessible. I feel like this is very simple, but in today's day and age, people are looking at your website on different things. Maybe it's a tablet, maybe it's a phone. So you want to make sure you can actually view it on all of those things and that it doesn't look distorted depending on the device. Some other things I would suggest are don't make your website too busy. So like not super bright colors or very ornate text. You want to typically stick with a few colors and fonts. Kind of think of it as like a room. You would want it to be rather cohesive. You wouldn't want to just have random pieces thrown together. Your imagery should really enhance your message and not distract from it. So, these visuals should, of course, represent who you are. You want to make sure it's easy to read and follow the info. That's the main goal here. Ensure any external links are also active and functioning. I know that also sounds very simple, but if you are linking to any other pages, please click on those links and make sure they go somewhere. The worst thing is when someone has a website and it's like, here, click on this link to learn more, contact me here, and then it's a dead link. And lastly, having an easy to follow, so like homepage, maybe each additional page having a heading and a subheading and body text, but making sure that the format is easy to read. I think of this, if we're kind of equating it to something school related, sort of like an outline. If I was writing you an outline for an essay I was going to write, you wouldn't write it just one paragraph with tons of sentences all together. You would have, one, talk about the topic. Maybe I would talk about the subtopics, A, B, C, D, that kind of thing. You want to make sure that it's well formatted and organized easily so people can follow. So I wanted to give you some examples of what I'm talking about here. So in the next few slides, I'll show you some screenshots of websites that I think are good examples of either simple to read text or clean and kind of cohesive imagery. So like this is a screenshot from my coaching website. So, my business is called Thrive, which I mentioned to you before, Thrive Guidance. So much of my imagery has to do with like growth and flourishing, because the idea is that I help individuals grow and flourish into whatever kind of career goals that they set. So I personally use a lot of plant and flower imagery because that kind of aligns with my brand. Here you see, like, this is what I was talking about with kind of a menu page. So this is another example of my website, but you'll see at the top right, I have the menu bar with the offerings, core values, contact, and my blog. This here is what you would see when you click on offerings. So I have, the career coaching, goal setting, and life coaching. These are the different things that I offer. And I give you kind of a quick blurb or explanation about each. Now, I also wanted to give you some examples of things that are not related to what I do. So these are some other examples of using like a headshot or an image of yourself. So this is a photographer I recently met. So, this is her about me page. She is a photographer. So of course the image is of her holding her camera. And that kind of further shows like what she does and who she is. And she gives a little blurb about who she is down at the bottom. So I thought this was a good example of an about me, or kind of like a elevator pitch or personal brand statement. Lastly, this is someone who I don't know personally. This is someone who I admire. She's a famous makeup artist. So I wanted to show you an example of someone's website who's demonstrating their work on the photos on their website, as well as highlighting their social media. So the makeup artist here, you're not looking at her, this is obviously a model, but the artist's name is Katie Jane Hughes. She has her portfolio here, some imagery of the makeup that she's done. And as you see at the top, she has her Instagram cited and a few other places for people to link to as well. But the thing I really want you to look at here is like how clear and crisp it is. It's easy to follow. You know where it's going to lead to when you're clicking on something, and it's clear, who she is and what she does. So kind of the last part of this is, once you've actually built this website and it's up and running and you've tested it out and it looks great, what do you actually do with it? So these are just some examples. Again, these are not the only way to utilize it, but just some things. If you have a LinkedIn, and if you don't, I definitely would suggest that you create a LinkedIn as well. But if you have a LinkedIn or you're looking to create one, I would definitely put your website on your LinkedIn somewhere. There are a couple places that you could potentially put it. Up at the top, you have kind of like a little bio area. There is also a location towards the bottom of your LinkedIn profile. You can link a personal website. I definitely suggest using that. You can put it in a signature in your emails. So whoever you're communicating with, gets a link so they can directly open up your site. Business cards, if you are looking to use or do use business cards up to this point, that's also a great place to put it. On your resume, I think in today's day and age, people often still print a resume when they're going physically into an interview. But I think especially in the past year or two with COVID, there's so much more that is virtual. Oftentimes resumes are not being printed. They are digital versions or PDFs. So I think having your personal website linked on your resume is actually a fabulous way to potentially include it, because recruiters or hiring managers are going to be able to click on or link to your website directly when they're looking at your profile from whatever applicant tracking system they're using. So that's another great place to display it. And then lastly, when applying to jobs or during the interview process. So what I mean here is, I'm sure many of you have applied, to jobs online, where then it'll ask for like an online portfolio or a personal website link down on the bottom. That's a really great way for you to make sure that your application stands out against someone who maybe does not have a personal website or an online portfolio. So including that in the actual application, I think, is a great way to use it. The other thing during the interview process where it might be used is if you are having a conversation with someone, whether it be a hiring manager or a recruiter, and they want to actually see some of your work or maybe see some of your testimonials or learn a little more, I think that's another great place to potentially plug your website and say, hey, okay, well, you know, I've gotten to talk to you, but if you actually want to see something that I've done, you know, here is my website and you can learn a little more. So those are kind of my top, I would say my top 5 places to use it. Obviously, they're not the only places, but I think they're very helpful. All right, so I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. So I do want to say thank you for your attention up to this point. But I wanted to open it up at this point for Q&A. I don't know if we have any in the chat coming through. Of course, you're welcome to unmute and speak as well if you'd like to answer, but I just wanted to open it up here.
Thank you very much, Nicola. We do have a few questions that came in the chat to me. If anyone else wants to continue to put questions in the chat, please do so. We will be monitoring that. If you want to speak, feel free to let me know or raise your hand, and we'll be happy to unmute you. A couple of questions for you to start things off. And again, please feel free to put some more questions in the chat. One question was, do you think it's preferable to have a static page on your website that has your info, contacts, and some of your work? Or should you have multiple pages with the navigation? And then how many pages is too many pages?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. So I think the static page is totally fine if that is what is pertinent to like you in your role. So for example, like I'm thinking of, let's say before I started my degree at Baruch, right? I was working in a different job that was a kind of a different career path. I was working more in an HR role. I probably wouldn't have had a website that was talking about like my career coaching at that time because I just wasn't there yet, right? So at that point, if I had my website, which I didn't, you know, maybe I would have a static page that just had my general info. Perhaps it was more of like a resume page. So I think if you don't have something particularly to display, meaning like you don't have art or photography or an example of your work, then I think it's totally fine to do a static page. The other kind of part of that question is how many is too many? I think as long as you're under, I would say under 8, I think you're fine. I would say once someone has to scroll either a lot down a page or across a page to find your different tabs, again, that's not a hard rule, but I think if someone's going to have to spend more than a few minutes clicking through the different sections of your website, most likely someone's probably not going to do it. So I would give the advice there of like, when I create how-to guides at my work, I try to keep them under a couple pages because I know people's attention span may not go past like 3 or 4 pages. So I think of websites like that too. So I would say under 8 if you can.
We got another question just now about asking if they can get a copy of this presentation. I do want to note that we will send a recording of this event out as well after the event. Mm-hmm. And a copy of that works for you, Nicola?
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. We can send around that presentation as well then for those who missed it. Another question here is, in terms of blogs, should you focus on a blog? Should you publish LinkedIn articles, which is another thing you can do? Should you post your blogs to LinkedIn? Or should you replicate the same stuff and put it on the blog and on LinkedIn? How should you go about tackling that?
That's a really, really good question also. So like, okay, so with the question of reposting LinkedIn articles, are we saying like these are LinkedIn articles that you find interesting? Is that what we're saying?
I think articles like the LinkedIn, you can like write articles like blog posts on LinkedIn.
Okay, I understand the question then. I think, you know, you could go a couple ways with that. I think personally, like if I look at my blog on my website, I typically publish a blog every 2 to 3 months or so. I then like to, because I have a LinkedIn for my coaching business, I like to then post my blog posts on LinkedIn as well, just so people see it more. I think generally speaking, it'll get more traction. You can definitely post it as well on a personal LinkedIn. There's no reason not to. But I think, yeah, like the more the merrier there. If you can get like more eyes on it, that's a great way. Honestly, even if you have a professional like Instagram or other sort of social media, Facebook, if you're using that, that's totally fine too. I think that's a great way of advertising it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you know, like you said, getting views no matter what platform it's on is the important thing. So you can put that out there. So it makes sense to me. On that similar vein with LinkedIn, someone asks, at what point do you think you should make a website versus just building up your LinkedIn profile as robustly as you can? Should you do both? Is there a point at which you should choose the website over building up your LinkedIn? How do you know?
Yeah, that's also a great point. I mean, I think for LinkedIn, you want to make sure you have a fully fleshed out LinkedIn profile, because I think, again, in this day and age, like, this is really like the main professional platform people are using. So if they Google you, if a recruiter or a hiring manager Googles you, that's probably one of the first things they are going to see. So like I've actually spoken at Baruch in regard to LinkedIn profiles in the past, but like making sure you have a photo on your LinkedIn, making sure you have like a little bit of bio or blurb about what you do, making sure your education and all of that is updated. That's so important. And I definitely I want everyone to make sure they have that and they do that. So that definitely doesn't replace anything with the personal website. I think of the personal website more as an enhancement. So if there's something that you cannot put on LinkedIn, or you feel that you can't really fully describe whatever it is, whether it's who you are or your services, then it should go onto a website. I think if you're really early in your career and maybe you don't have that much to display or show, then the website might not be necessary yet. But if that is the case, that's totally fine. But one thing I do suggest you think about is a domain name. Like if you think in the future, hey, 3 years from now, I want to try to launch my own business, I'm just not there yet. I do really suggest that you look at domain names and potentially think about buying one now, because sometimes when you want a domain name, it's too late and someone else has purchased it and you can't have it anymore. So it might be worth at least looking at that, even if you're not ready to build the actual website.
Excellent. Question here, if you're making a website about a side project that doesn't have to do with your primary job, should you include information about your primary job, even though they don't have anything to do with each other?
That's also a good question. I'm going to say it depends. And the reason I say it depends is I would include information about what you do generally in your kind of full-time job if it is pertinent. So like if whatever work you do most of the time in the week kind of enhances the skill set that you're talking to, you might want to mention it. The only reason I say maybe here is if you are doing that, if you are mentioning like where you work and what you do, I would kind of lean being more vague. So I typically would not state specific companies. If you're talking to like maybe your photography skills, I don't know if I would go out of my way and list exactly where I work, but maybe I would say, hey, I've worked as a photographer professionally for 8 years, something along those lines. The other reason I say it depends is some companies may have like privacy clauses or things that you cannot display or speak to. There might be work that you've created at your company that is essentially owned by your company, so that you don't have the right or the privilege to display it on a personal website. So if you are thinking of doing that, I would just say like tread lightly, make sure you get things approved. I don't want anyone getting in trouble. So make sure you talk to a manager or a supervisor and make sure that it's okay that you show something before you display it on a personal website.
Yeah. So I guess like if you're a photographer, but by day you're an accountant at Deloitte, maybe you just say, yeah, I work in accounting, but at
Yes,
night I'm a photographer and here's my portfolio. Not
exactly.
get too into specifics about Deloitte.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably not even necessary to, because it's not pertinent.
Yeah. Um, any other questions? Please, if anyone has a question, direct to the chat or let me know if you'd like to ask it. We'd be happy to unmute you. Are there any questions? It was a wonderful presentation, Nicole. Really enjoyed it.
Thank
And
you.
I did get a few questions asking about your contact information as well, and how they
Yeah.
could, reach you outside of this. Is that something you'd be able to provide?
Yes, definitely. I can include it in the chat now if that's helpful also. And then it's on, if we send out the deck also, it's on the last page.
Perfect.
But yeah, that here is both my website and then that's also my direct email.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any other questions before we wrap up for this evening? I want to thank you so much for this presentation, Nicola. This was wonderful.
Of course.
Really enjoyed this. I thought by the way, everybody should definitely take advantage of the LinkedIn Learning that Nicola recommended.
Mhm.
Definitely take advantage of that. And I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is sort of figuring out those first steps. And you really helped to illuminate us on how to do that, demystify some of that. We know that it's not that expensive to do something on a personal level. We also got a question, by the way, from someone asking just about, Baruch resources about this. And I will get back to you all on that. I'm going to double check with my colleagues who work in career services throughout the college and see what we might have in terms of any discounts or something. I do know that Baruch worked with Wix a couple of years ago on a
Mhm.
session, and there might be some resources available. I will let you know, but I find out. Well, here we go. We have one last question.
Oh,
Do you have any advice or insight on how to make your website stand out when having one is expected in your field or part of your resume? For example, UX, illustration, art portfolio.
okay, okay, cool. So this is someone who, okay, so this is part of your field. Well, okay, I think the main thing here is I would have you think about your work and kind of some of the stuff that I talked about before of like what makes you unique, the things that are your kind of special qualities. So from this, I can't tell. I'm assuming that probably you're a more artistic person. You're either drawing or an artist of some sort. I think making the website stand out would be one, definitely including information about you on like how you got into doing what you do. So maybe it's a little bit of like a story about how you fell in love with art by taking art classes at the Met Museum of Art every summer as a child. Or maybe, your mom bought you your first pen and paper, in 2008, and that's how you fell in love with it. I think including like a little bit of a story is a really beautiful thing. And then also just actually showing what you do, because whatever it is that you create obviously is going to be unique. You are not creating the same thing as the next artist or the next illustrator. So being able to actually display some of your pieces, even if they weren't like done professionally, but being able to just show some examples of what you can do, that's really what's going to make you stand out because that's special to you. Like that's your special seasoning, so to speak.
And I see that you mentioned that you're transitioning into UX, UI design field. Um, so absolutely, I think to speak to what Nicola was just saying, emphasizing the story is really good. I have actually a friend who transitioned into that same field and
Mhm.
talked a bit about the reason for the transition and the interest and the passion for that field. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
And good luck with your transition. Good
Yeah,
luck.
definitely. Good luck. I'm sure you'll do great.
Excellent. Any other questions before we wrap up? Well, it looks like we've hit just about 7. Thank you very much, Nicola. Really appreciated this. Thank you, everyone who attended, for joining us, being such a great group. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me after this event. I will be contacting you later this week with the recording of this and other resources. And I hope to see you at some future Baruch events in the next month or two. And hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. And good luck as we embark on the year 2022. Any last words, Nicola?
I want to thank you for having me. I mean, this was really fun. I hope to see you all in the future at some other webinars as well. But yeah, feel free to reach out if you just have questions, even on anything that I talked about. My email is in the chat. I'm always happy to meet someone new and learn a little bit more about what you're looking to do in the future. So it was nice chatting today. I love this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your evening and hope to see you soon.
Have
Take
a good night.
care.
Bye.
Good night.